We'll start talking now about getting to Yes, Chapter 6. In this chapter, the authors introduce the notion of BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. They acknowledge that it's important to figure out what your bottom line is, but we normally set that too high, and that limits our power to maybe incorporate other possible benefits from a negotiation. And instead of ruling out alternatives that fall below your bottom line, a better approach is to incorporate your BATNA. If this deal didn't work out, what alternatives would you have? When you frame it that way, you're also less likely to get too caught up in positional bargaining. Suppose, for example, that you are selling your house and the buyers are being extremely positional. They won't pay 1 cent more. They want this other concession. In other words, they're being very much carving out their turf. It may be easy for you to say, gosh, I am not going to go below this certain price, and it's difficult dealing with these people. This is where I draw the line, no more. It's understandable that you're responding to positional bargaining with more positional bargaining, but you're getting your ego involved and you may not be getting the best deal for you. If this deal did not work out, what's your next plan? Has anyone else made an offer to buy your house? Have you now entered an agreement to buy a new house yourself? And what will happen to that new purchase if this one falls apart? Think about what the consequences are. It may not be so much of haggling over whether or not you get that last $5,000, but instead, how much more will a delay cost you? What guarantee do you have that someone else would pay this much for your house? What guarantee do you have about how long you would wait to find another buyer for your house? Don't focus on the other party so much. Focus on what alternatives do you have to this transaction. That then informs what you should be doing to further your own best interests. The better your BATNA, the better your position. The authors caution us on one common error, and that is to see alternatives in the cumulative rather than the alternative. If you don't get this promotion at work, leaving you unhappy in your job, what choices do you have? Well, you could drop everything and travel in Southeast Asia. You could go back and get your MBA. You could decide to have a baby. You could do all kinds of things, but you're not going to do all of them. So sometimes people see all these things in the cumulative. Yeah, I could travel. I could have a baby. I could go back to school. Well, you're probably not going to do all of those at once. So ask yourself, what other choices do I have, but I'm not going to be able to do all of them. Now, how good does that alternative look to staying in my current job? The authors caution us to form a tripwire. In other words, some early warning that the agreement isn't going well, or that the negotiation should just be something you walk away from. Instead, what most of us do is we get confused by sunk costs. Now, pretend you're at the grocery store. You're standing in line. There's 4 people ahead of you. All of a sudden, a new line opens up. If you switched lines, you'd be the first person in that new line. What do you do? What's the rational thing to do? Switch lines. What do some of us do? We think, I've already invested 12 minutes in this line. I'm staying in this line, even though there's 4 people ahead of me. Well, you can see that's not rational, but what we're getting confused about is the fallacy of sunk costs. Just because you sunk effort, money, time into some particular strategy doesn't mean you should keep doing it. Switch lines. The same thing happens in negotiations. When we invest a bunch of time in it, invest a bunch of money and emotions and planning, we think it doesn't even occur to us sometimes to walk away, but sometimes we should. One thing that will help us walk away when the time is right is create some trigger that will say to you, oh, time to move on. Once you've engaged in negotiations, let's say, about renting commercial space, and although you decide you're going to spend not more than $12,000 in form of planning, employee time, seeing if you can make the space available, seeing what other alternatives there are. If it doesn't happen within that expenditure of time, money, then it's not going to happen. Walk away. Decide, in other words, decide for yourself, at what point do I walk away from this? That helps you think about it when you're less emotional, and you can be more rational about it, and you're not just focused on, oh my gosh, I've already invested so much in this space. The best strategy then is to build your BATNA as much as possible. Sometimes there's not a lot you can do with your circumstances, but to the degree that you're able to build a better BATNA, you have more power. The better your alternatives, the easier it is for you to walk away from a negotiation. So the authors tell us, develop your BATNA, develop more alternatives, develop better alternatives. If you can't reach a good agreement with this particular party, what choices do you have? So let's say you're negotiating for better terms at your place of employment. How could you improve your BATNA? Well, you could start looking for other jobs, other careers. You could start looking at other divisions with your organization. It's possible they may have a better offer for you. In other words, search for new opportunities and search for improving your existing opportunities. Be practical about it. Think in your own mind, at what point will I walk away from this job? If I don't get this position or this salary, what choices do I have? How can I build better choices? Because it's easier to walk away the better your choice is. Consider the other side's BATNA, again, because we tend to be so myopic, so self-centered. We just think about our own choices, and we're not thinking about their choices. The more you know about the alternatives that the other parties to a negotiation have, the better you can strategize. If their alternatives seem unrealistic, you might point that out to them. It might help them lower their expectations and see that you're really offering them something better. Sometimes we sort of get into this learned helplessness stage of, I can't negotiate, they're an insurance company. I can't negotiate, that's the IRS. I can't negotiate, the other side is bigger and more powerful. Try to get out of thinking that there's no room for negotiation. I acknowledge that every once in a while there is such a circumstance, but often there is an opportunity to improve your position. The more you can improve your alternatives, the better you'll get in the end. And the more you can show someone else any shortcomings in their alternatives, the better a deal you will get. And the authors give us the bottom line. The more easily you can walk away, the happier you can walk away, the greater your capacity to have some effect on the outcome.